Anglo-Saxons vs. Vikings. The iconic matchup that defines the early Middle Ages of today's modern England. Their intertwined history stretches over the course of the 8th to 11th centuries as both sides struggled for control of Britannia. Today we will examine the military equipment available to warriors on both sides of the conflict. First, it will be important to note that both the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings actually shared very similar weapons and armor due to their close proximity, constant interaction, and cultural connections. The main difference being in what ways this equipment was utilized on the battlefield as a result of each side's method of military organization and operation. Generally speaking, both sides used a roughly two-tiered system where the army corps was composed of professional household guard troops while the rest of the force was made up of less well-trained and equipped levy or militia. For the Anglo-Saxons, these were the Hearth Guard and the Fyrd, while for the Vikings it was the Hird and the Odalbonders. Between the elite forces, there would be little difference in the high-level training and equipment available to them. Amongst the lower tiers, the Viking Odalbonders might hold a slight advantage compared to the Anglo-Saxon Fyrd. This was a result of the fact that the Viking troops were the ones operating on the offensive, away from home, which tends to self-select for better armed, experienced, and disciplined forces, compared to the Anglo-Saxon militias, which were called up in a reactionary manner from the general population to defend their lands. With that being said, let us now dive into the available equipment. Weapons included spears, axes, swords, seekses, javelins, bows, and slings. By far the most common was the spear. Reliable and easy to produce, they consisted of an iron spearhead mounted on an approximately 2-meter long wooden shaft. The point followed either the broad-bladed Celtic style or the short, barbed style of the late Imperial legions. The heavy variant could be used both over and underhand in combat, while the lighter variant might even be thrown like a Roman pilum. Axes were also fairly common. They required relatively little iron and were easy to produce by societies which were already closely working with timber. Axes were generally one-handed and could be used as frontline weapons or as tools whilst on the campaign. The most basic designs may have been similar to those used by civilians, while more expensive versions were adapted for combat. These were generally designed for quick blows, targeting an opponent, rather than long wind-up swings at a tree. The bearded axe, for instance, featured an extended lower bite, which could be used as a hook to pull at an enemy's weapon or shield. Another popular design was the Dane Axe, which featured a long, forward-swept blade for superior shearing. Some battle axes would become quite elaborate, and were favored by elite troops. Huskarls, for instance, were famed for the two-handed broad-bladed axes they wielded towards the end of the Viking Age. Compared to spears and axes, swords were far rarer and frequently held tremendous status. The design most popular throughout Northern Europe had a broad, approximately 90 centimeter long, two-edged blade with a guard, grip, and pommel. Such weapons were suited to slashing and cutting rather than the stabbing of the famed Roman gladius. Cheaper versions were created using old methods whereby iron pieces were beaten into sheets and then hammered together as layered strips. Higher quality swords used newer pattern welding techniques where various grades of metal were intertwined and forged into a blade. Additional decorating and crafting would go into the guard and pommel designs, as is evidenced by the discovery of many impressive grave goods. Seekses were smaller, single-edged swords typically reserved as secondary weapons or tools. Ranged weapons such as bows and slings are attested to in art and literature, but do not play a major role in warfare. They were surely deployed as weapons while skirmishing or as support in a main engagement, but were never fielded and organized into large enough units to have a significant impact on the battlefield. Rather, they were primarily pieces of hunting equipment which a soldier might carry along on campaign as a means to obtain food. In terms of defensive equipment, the most important element was the shield. These were typically circular in shape, with diameters ranging from around 0.3 to 0.6 meters. Smaller versions were more maneuverable and could be used in skirmishing, while the larger versions were standard in the main battle line. Kite-shaped shields would also make an appearance later on in the 11th century. Generally speaking, the shields were constructed from planks of wood, which were glued together and covered in leather. An iron boss was placed over a central hole with a cross grip attached on the soldier's side. Lastly, bronze or iron fittings were installed on the edges. Protected by a shield, the torso was usually lightly covered. Individuals might wear a cloak fastened by a metal brooch or don a knee-length tunic gathered around the waist by a belt. The legs and arms were either bare or covered by some fabric. Those who could afford to would likely have packed on more layers. The first step up would be to throw on a padded linen or wool jacket. On top of this, One might add actual metal. This could be in the form of lamellar armor, whereby small iron plates were linked together into adjacent or overlapping rows. Another option would be to adopt a partial or full mail shirt. This was created by linking hundreds of metal rings and was extremely expensive. As the period progressed, it appears that mail became more and more common and covered increasing amounts of the warrior's body. Other exposed parts of the body could be protected as well. The most logical next investment would be to protect one's head. Again, the cheapest option would be only to provide a defense against the elements. This would have been some sort of simple hat, such as the common Anglo-Saxon Phrygian cap. The most expensive option would be the helmet. A common design was the spangle helm variant. This conical-shaped helmet consisted of metal strips that formed the framework of the design, with several curved steel or bronze plates riveted into place. A nose guard was often included, as well as hinged cheek pieces and a metal aventail to protect the next. Some versions even included eye guards that gave it a spectacled appearance. As we have stated, the type and amount of equipment used by each soldier was determined by the depth of an individual's purse. The poor made do with only the essentials, while the rich were fully equipped. While this is a common trend throughout history, it should be noted that the average panoply of these armies was rather poor when compared to that of the larger powers of their age, and especially when compared to those of classical antiquity. Simply put, combat and society had changed. Gone were the days of massive pitched battles between tens of thousands of men from large organized empires. In their place were the low-level and fluid engagements between war bands numbering in their hundreds, fielded by petty kings and war chiefs. There will be much more to cover when it comes to discussing the armies and campaigns of this time period. But for now, I hope that this look into the military equipment of the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings has been enlightening. I'd like to thank our supporters on Patreon and the many talented researchers, writers, and artists who made this video possible. Please consider contributing to fund future content. If you found this topic interesting, check out these related videos about our fascinating past. Be sure to like and subscribe for more history, and check out our description for ways to support the channel. Thanks for watching.